Welcome to Drawing Hands with Bruce Potter. Right, we're going to start with, I'm just going to draw my hand because it is literally in the end of my hand, end of my arm, so it makes it easier to see where you're going. And we'll decide how we're going to draw it. So I'll just draw it like that, just nice and natural. And so what I'm going to start with drawing is I'll just see the shape that makes up that inside part of the arm, which is this sort of vaguely circular shape, although I'm just doing that little dent there because that's where the thumb goes. And within that, we've got the shape of those bends and curves. There's one there. And the shape of the fingers, which I can sort of see falling back on themselves. And it does this. And then the shape of the thumb. So essentially what you're drawing is you're drawing what you see. But draw one shape relative to another one in terms of size. So when you're trying to draw proportion is measurement. So if you look at that, you essentially got the feel of a hand already. That's the wrist joint there. Okay, but I haven't done any detail yet. All I've been doing here is just marking off where things go. Right, now that I've done that, I can start drawing a bit more carefully. So I'm going to start with these fingers because that's probably the bit that most people find a bit hard. And always be prepared to adjust your drawing. I mean, as I see there, I've just, since I moved, now I've adjusted my hand. So I need to actually try to get a similar sort of angle back to what I originally had, but it's not exactly the same. But that's what happens when you draw from life. Things never end up being exactly the same. So when drawing, always be prepared to adjust. So I'm going to just draw a little bit more carefully. This little finger that fits in here, and it fits about there, and I can draw the negative space in between those two fingers, and that will give me the distance in between the fingers more accurate. Plus it also helped me to get my the size of the fingers accurate as well. Now this finger is quite foreshortened, so what we actually do see is the top part of the finger actually coming towards us. So if you draw what you see, it should work. If you draw what you think it should be, then you're more than likely to draw it incorrectly. You'll make your fingers too long. And that's the thing about foreshortening. Often when you foreshorten, you think, oh, that can't be right. It's not. The finger's not long enough. But if that's what you see, that's what you draw, because that's what it is. So always draw what you see first. Don't question yourself and think, oh, it can't be right. Because often it might not look right, but that's because we're conditioned to believe things should look a certain way. And if we draw them things, but as an artist, what you should be doing is actually drawing things the way you see them. So draw the negative space there, so that you can show people what the world actually looks like. Because a lot of people see the world with blinkers on. They see the world the way they've been conditioned to believe it should look. And an artist's job really is to show them what it actually does look like. So that finger there is actually very, very short. It's like that. It looks like a stumpy little finger. But once I start doing some shading in here, we should start to get a sense of three-dimensional, or a little bit more three-dimensional, because the lights and darks are extremely important. We can see the shape of the curve there. And it should then start to look more like it's actually coming out towards us. There's a lot of shadow across this area here as well. There's some reflected light there coming in towards the edge. Now my initial, as I said, things will change and you'll have to adjust as you go, but the initial drawing that I did, I've made bigger than what I'm doing now. So because I've made it slightly bigger, what I need to do is adjust the initial drawing a little bit. Because as you start drawing details, you'll start to see things a bit more clearly, and you'll need to then obviously adjust as you go to get things to be more accurate. Now because it's a hand, I'm not too worried about being absolutely 100% perfect. It's not a portrait of a hand, we're just trying to draw a hand. If I was doing a portrait, I'd be just a lot more careful about my shapes. But this is a quick drawing. We want it to be reasonably fast. Just a demonstration, so the shapes, it's important to get them as close as you can, but don't get carried away if they're not 100% right. As long as they're sort of 3/4 there, you're probably going to find it's still going to work. The important thing is getting that light and dark reasonably accurate. If you get that light and dark right, and they're all in the right places to get the dark tones in, and you get that good contrast between lights and dark, then your hand should start to look more three-dimensional and start to look more alive and more like a real hand. So the light and dark is probably your most important asset We're trying to make it look alive and trying to make it look real. So in other words, you're shading in. The shapes are important to get as accurate as you can, but within reason. Don't get too spend forever just trying to get your shapes right. When you're doing a portrait, then you obviously got to be a lot more careful. But when you're doing a portrait, I find it a lot easier to actually just work from a photograph, because one thing the photograph is it's two-dimensional already. At the moment we're working from a three-dimensional object, which is my hand, and trying to turn it into a two-dimensional illusion of a three-dimensional object, which sounds a bit confusing, and it can be confusing if your brain is not thinking of it in the right way. So the way I see my hand there, even though I know it's three-dimensional, I know that, but I don't see it that way when I'm drawing it. The way I see it when I'm drawing it is it's actually a two-dimensional pattern in front of me. If I move it, the pattern changes. So if I'm drawing that pattern and I draw it I see as a pattern, it's going to work because I'm only seeing my hand in two dimensions. And that's one thing that your brain has to sort of start to learn how to do as an artist, to start to see things not as three-dimensional all the time, but see them simply as shapes made up of light and dark and colour. And when you're working like this with a pencil, all you're working with is shapes made up of light and dark. So colour doesn't even come into the equation. So, and if you do that, your drawing should become easier because you're actually you're simplifying things for yourself. And always try to keep things simple in your mind, and it'll make it easier when you're actually doing it. Right, and as I said, I was just drawing the shading as I go, because by drawing the shading in, I actually start to see things more clearly, because the shading helps to see the shapes more clearly. So you can sort of see now that hand's starting to take shape in terms of the fingers, but this whole area through here, haven't got to it yet, but that's also built up with shadows. But we've got this bit of area here where the thumb comes, and it's got some wrinkles and some shading in as well. So I'll work some of that in, and it's got this big line that cuts across, right across. And I guess everybody's different, but our hands are all made up of variations of similar types of shapes. So even though your line work in your hand might be a bit different to mine, it's actually not that much different. And we've got these wrinkles here where the joint's the wrist joint. And if I just shade those in. Now if you're not sure, or if you find it takes too long, smudge it with your finger. Good gradation of tone is always a hell of a lot better than tone that's just too sudden. And if you're drawing big like this, nothing wrong with smudging with your finger. There's no rules in art. Do whatever it is you need to do to make it work. Now there's this lot of shadow across here on this side of the thumb, but there's that reflected light, so you can sort of see that I've gone darker towards the middle, and as it joins the edge of the finger there's that reflected light, so I get that in as well. The reflected light will help it make it more rounded and more look more accurate, because that's what you see reflected light. And you will see reflected light all the time, and no matter what you're drawing, whether it be a hand or a face or a table or whatever, a tree, you're going to see reflected light in there. So getting that reflected light in is very, very important, because that's what essentially turns things in from looking very flat into making things look really three-dimensional. And it's something that a lot of people actually don't see. Well, you should see it if you look for it, but they just don't even realize it's there. And getting that reflected light in is a key to making your fingers look less like sausages. So there you got a hand. It looks like a hand. I'll just zoom out a little bit because I think I've lost a little bit of that top finger. You've got good foreshortening, and the light and dark is what makes it come alive. Anyway, thank you very much for joining me for Drawing with Bruce.